Hi, I'm Adam Summer. You're listening to the Yerushalmi Talk podcast with the support of the Yeshivat Javar Yerushalayim in Har Nof, Jerusalem. This is Peah, chapter 3, Halacha 6. The Mishnah that's going to be coming up is going to talk about the minimum size a field has to be in order to be obligated in Peah. And it's going to give four opinions. The next Mishnah is going to give a fifth view, but this one is going to give four views. Now, this Mishnah and this set of Gemaras gets into a lot of aggadah stuff. The way they're going to derive this has roots that have me thinking about it for, I don't know, the whole morning. I can't stop thinking about it because of the depth, the way it's going to be connecting to the Mishkan, the way it's going to be connecting to the Ten Commandments, on the sizing and the measurements. And I'm really inspired to go and do more research because you can see that there's a hidden pearl here about the sizing, and there's just a lot here. It's a very short Mishnah, and it's a very short halacha, but there's a lot of depth here, and I think that it's really thought-provoking. So let's get into the Mishnah. Rabbi Eliezer says, land within a quarter kav of seed can be planted, is obligated in Peah. So we were talking before about separation boundaries and separating one field to another field. This could be because of ownership, or this could be to separate two different crops, or this could be to separate so that there's no kalayim, so that the measure on that is going to be a quarter kav. Now, a quarter kav, that's going to be 6 eggs. That's going to be the amount of seed that goes into 6 eggs. And Rabbi Eliezer here is going to maintain that the area in which one would normally plant this quantity of seed is going to be the minimum size that's going to be subject to a field. And why is that? Because we know from in Kalayim, in chapter 2, in Halacha 7 of Kalayim, that this is going to be the area which is going to come out to 104 and 1/6 square amos, and that it's going to be used as a separation border. And there's a lot going on here with how he's going to be picking this, right? So in the Torah, in Exodus 27:18, it's going to give the dimensions of the tabernacle, the Mishkan, and the courtyard is going to be 100 amos by 50 amos. We know that in the Bavli in Eruvin 23b, it says that this is the area that has the capacity to plant 2 seyas. So if we look at this, there's going to be 6 kavs in 1 seya, and this is, again, a quarter kav is going to be a volume of 6 eggs. And since there's 6 kavs in 1 seya, it follows that a quarter kav is 1/24th of a seya, or 1/48 of 2 seyas. And it's going to follow that the area within a quarter kav can be planted as 1/48 of the 5,000 square amos area of the tabernacle, which is coming out to 104 and 1/6 amos. I think worth checking out is the amount of bread that could be, if you were to plant 2 seyas and harvest it and leave Peah and leave all the correct tithes, what quantity of bread or challah would you be able to halachically make? I think that's worth checking. I think it's about 5. I think you can make about 5 challahs. So, but that's worth checking. The the second view is going to be like this. So, wow, what a first view right off the bat, how the the minimum amount is going to be used for a border for separation of Kalayim, but how it's going to be, and all of these are basically going to be corresponding to the area for the courtyard in the Mishkan. How deep is that? Because you have Shabbos is connected to the Mishkan, and you have in even in Tanis, in Yerushalmi and Tanis, it says that the Shmona Esrei is corresponding to the 18 times that to the 18 commands that Betzalel gives in the building of the Mishkan in the second time it's brought up. So there's a lot of depth here about how all the farms and the sale of seeds are going to be corresponding to these Bet Rovas and Bet Seyas, and how that's corresponding to the temple. Rabbi Yeshua says in this second view, says even land that yields 2 seyas of produce. So he's saying that basically the amount of produce that is going to be for the minimum size field obligated for Peah is actually going to come out to be what the size of the temple courtyard would be. That's really beautiful. So Rabbi Yeshua defines the minimum field not in terms of the quantity of seed planted in it, but rather in terms of its yield. And the area required to plant a yield of 2 seah is going to be smaller than the area in which a quarter kav is planted. Thus, Rabbi Yeshua is ruling more stringently than Rabbi Eliezer. So I take that back. I said that he's saying that it's the size of the temple courtyard. That's not correct. He's saying that it's actually going to be a size that's smaller than what Rabbi Eliezer said, but that the amount of yield that you could do is going to be the size that would be two seah, which is really amazing. In other words, if you were to do that, you would be able to produce a yield of 2 seah, which means that you would be able to spread that over all of that land. In other words, the yield, the produce from the from that amount from this area that's the quarter kav, that quarter kav could produce 2 seahs of wheat, and that would be able to cover the 2 seahs which would be in the temple courtyard. That's really amazing. A little bit about that. There's always this concept of baracha, and we'll learn about it in Orlah. Everywhere in Orlah, the word baricha, which is when you're bending over to create new shoots for vines, for vineyard. Rabbi Yochanan says everywhere in the Masechet it's written as baracha. And why baracha? Because it's generative, that it's creating and adding to it, right? So that you started with one vine and you maybe folded over from the one vine 3 or 4 vines. You've created 3 or 4 new trees that you can sever the area, and you basically have a new tree. And so that from one you've created 3. And so in this way, we could see that it's talking about this concept of bracha, which is that it's generative. One of the amazing things about the siyum says the Vilna Gaon is something that's also has this quality of being generative, where if you look at the letters in siyum, that each one increases in size in gematria, and so you could say, like, well, that's interesting for increasing Torah learning, and that there's something generative about that. And that's basically what they're saying here. What Rabbi Yeshua is pointing out here is that there's that how how this is going to be generative, and how that this is going to be fitting within the produce will be to the size of the temple courtyard. And it's also interesting because it shows that it's not accidental that this quarter kav, which is going to be an area that's going to be approximately, if it were to be a square, it would be a side with 10.5 amos, so that this would be something that would be able to separate out kalayim and also create a division between fields. And it's interesting because then when you're planting within this division, it's going to create something that's going to take up the size of what the produce, if you were to spread it out, would cover the temple, the tabernacle, the Mishkan courtyard. Very, very amazing. Rabbi Tarfon is going to give a third view, and he's going to say even land that measures 6 by 6 tefachim. Now, this size is going to be less than what Rabbi Yeshua gives, and the Gemara is going to give a rationale for it. I want to point out here that just something, I was watching video of, I guess, Indians harvesting wheat by hand with a sickle, and if you look at how they're doing it, if they're grabbing an amount that's going to be a large handful, where they're crouching over and gathering all of this wheat together with their hand over a pretty big area, that area is going to come out to around 6 tefachim. So Rabbi Tarfon is not that far off. It really is about that size. Another thing that's really interesting is what's 6 by 6 tefachim. It's what Moshe Rabbeinu brought down. It's the luchos. The size of luchos is 6 by 6 tefachim. So how amazing is that? And that's also going to be something that's going to connect back to Masechet and Kalayim, because that's going to be a size garden for if they want to plant 5 seeds within a garden. It's going to be 6 by 6 tefachim. But we were just talking about something that's connected with the courtyard, and something that's going to be going within the temple as well, and the Mishkan as well, are going to be the luchos. And what is Rabbi Tarfon pointing out here? He's pointing out that the minimum size is going to be the size of the luchos themselves. That's a really beautiful, deep thing. What's this fourth view? Rabbi Yeshua ben Basira says, even if there is only enough to reap and repeat reaping. So that sounds like it's going to be smaller than all of them. And I just want to point out what the Mara Fulda says about this. He says that to perform 2 acts of reaping, that's what the Mishnah says. The normal procedure for cutting grain is that with a fistful of grain, it would be grasped by one hand, says the Mara Fulda, and cut with a sickle in the other hand. And Rabbi Yeshua ben Basira maintains that the minimum harvest obligated in Peah must invoke at least 2 such cuts. That is, a crop of 2 fistfuls. The small area needed to produce such a crop is taken by Rabbi Yeshua ben Basira as a minimum Peah for the field. And the reason for this ruling is as follows, says the Mara Fulda. He says, the law of Peah commands one who begins his harvest not to finish his harvest to the end. And translated into terms of the normal harvesting procedure, this would mean that one who begins his harvest by cutting 1 fistful of grain may not complete his harvest by cutting the final fistful. Thus, the minimum harvest to which the law of Peah is applied is one that has 2 fistfuls of grain, 1 fistful with which the farmer begins to harvest, and the final fistful that he refrains from completely harvesting. Now, I just want to point out that even though that this fistful might just take up, or these two fistfuls might take up 6 tefachim of land. That's not what's going to be the measure. It's not going to be done by the land. It's going to be done by this idea of reaping and what's going to be harvested, so that we're not, even though that it might be that size of land, that totally could be, that's not going to be the measure. The measure is going to be more refined than that, which is what Rabbi Yeshua ben Basira is pointing out. And even though that 2 fistfuls could cover that 6 by 6 tefachim that Rabbi Tarfon's talking about, it's even refined more than that and zeroed in more than that to be this 2 fistfuls, so that you have, 1 fistful and then you're cutting it, and the other fistful that you're leaving it, but you could cut it if you wanted to, and it's being measured by that, even if that those two would reside on a 6 by 6 tefachim measure. So it's even more precise. And the Mishnah concludes, and it says the halacha is in accordance with his words being Rabbi Yeshua ben Basira, that it's this idea of measuring it in terms of grasping it and cutting it and then being able to do it again. Because we know the Torah talks about that there has to be this minimum of 2 acts of harvesting or reaping. There's one to trigger it, and then there's a final one that you're not taking, but the poor person is. And so they're really, according to Rabbi Yeshua ben Basira, to be the minimum size, it would have to be obligated in Peah. It would be like this. So I just want to point out that legal decisions encountered in the Mishnah are not necessarily going to be accepted in practice. So the Rambam, in his commentary on Hilchos Matanos Aniyim in 2.3, rejects the view of Rabbi Yeshua ben Basira in favor of Rabbi Akiva, who's coming in the next Mishnah. So this is not necessarily the halacha lamaisa, and we don't paskin by the Mishnah, but the Mishnahs are structured and put in here for us to have a framework to start thinking about. I think what's different about the way Rabbi Yeshua ben Basira is looking at this versus, say, Rabbi Tarfon, who is one of the teachers of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Tarfon is talking about something that's going to be a size of a field. And that, in other words, looking at it in terms of a minimum size of a field in order to be obligated in Peah. And I think that Rabbi Yeshua ben Basira is saying that, he's saying even more precise than that it's based upon what could be cut, not necessarily the amount of land. In other words, there has to be enough land where the stalks grow and you could grab it and grab it again, harvest it and then harvest it again. But the difference between Rabbi Tarfon's statement or Rabbi Yeshua's statement or Rabbi Eliezer's statement is that they're giving a land size, and Rabbi Yeshua ben Basira is not giving a land size. So that's a difference. So the we're going to see that the Rambam is going to favor the Rabbi Akiva's version for this 5th opinion that's going to be coming up in the next view. But these are all worth looking at and trying to understand. Now, before we get started, I just want to point to where this comes from. Where does Peah come from? Peah is coming from Leviticus 19:9, and that over there in the Torah it says, "You shall not finish off the corner of your field to harvest it." And so you have this seemingly extra to harvest it there. So that's the source from that. So the Gemara is going to get into it, and it's going to discuss the sources for these first 3 opinions in the Mishnah, and it's going to start with the first opinion, and it's going to go with Rabbi Eliezer. It says, what is the basis for the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer? And the Gemara answers. It says, the term your field is stated here with regards to Peah, and that's going to be in 19:9. It's going to say, you shall not finish off the corner of your field to harvest it. And the term your field is stated there with regards to Kalayim. In Kalayim in 19:19, it says, in Leviticus 19:19, it says, your field do not sow with Kalayim. We know that Kalayim is a forbidden mixture of crops. We're supposed to have, what's beautiful about learning Zerayim is that the Halacha is always pointing toward rational farms, farms that are easy to harvest, farms that are easy to identify, and that it's looking at structuring land in a rational way and in a cogent way. And that's one of the remarkable things when you go through Zerayim. You're going to see that again and again and again. And part of the Masechet and Kalayim is not organizing land usage in a chaotic way where it's hard to identify and hard to grow and hard to harvest, and it's in this case hard to give Peah. So that we're trying to always go for these rational, organized systems of farming and land usage, particularly in Eretz Yisrael. And the term field here in Peah, and only 10 verses later, when it's talking about Kalayim, they both use the word your field. So the sugya reads, the term your field is stated here with regard to Peah, and the term your field is stated here with regard to Kalayim. So this common expression constitutes a gezerah shava. That's basically what Rabbi Eliezer is saying. There's a gezerah shava here. And the sugya says, just as the term your field stated there with regard to Kalayim refers to land within which a quarter kav of seed can be planted, and so too the term your field stated here for Peah refers to land with which a quarter kav of seed can be planted. Now, I want to take a look at the Pnei Moshe here and have the Pnei Moshe help us to look at this in a deeper way. Now, basically what Rabbi Eliezer is saying, he's saying, look, there's a gezerah shava here between your field in 19:9 and your field in Leviticus 19:19, just 10 lines away. And we know that in Kalayim, the your field there for this minimum size there is going to be a quarter kav of seed here that can be planted. So too over here, it must be that the minimum size has to be a quarter kav, because we know that from a gezerah shava from your field. And Pnei Moshe is going to say that the Mishnah in Kalayim in 2:10 teaches that one must separate two species of grain growing in a field by this amount of land in order to avoid violating the prohibition against Kalayim of the field. And this is because when the two species are separated by this amount, they are considered to be separated by a distinct field. When, however, they are not separated by this amount, they are considered to be planted in one field. Thus, the minimum amount that can be considered a distinct field is land within which a quarter kav can be planted. That's what the Pnei Moshe points out. So he's saying that we know that this is what's constituting a field over here, so it must be over here as well. And the Gemara is going to answer. The sugya says the term your field is stated here with regard to Peah, and it is stated there with regard to shichicha, and you forgot a sheaf in your field. So we know that in Devarim in 24:19, the laws of shichicha, which are the sheaves that you forgot, are where that's going to be pointed out, that's going to use the word your field, you're in the field as well. And the term basically like, oh, well, you forgot the the sheaf in the field, that the term field is gonna teach a gezerah shava that's gonna teach that just as the term field stated there with regard to shchicha refers to two say of produce, so too the field stated here with regards to peah refers to land that yields two sayas of produce. So that's going to be the answer that Rabbi Yeshua is going to give. So Rabbi Yeshua is gonna the sugya says that what is the basis for the opinion of Rabbi Yeshua, and the Gemara is going to answer, and it's going to say the term your field is stated here with regard to peah, and it is stated there with regard to shchicha, and you forgot a sheaf in the field, and the common term field basically is going to be the gezerah shava. And the sugya continues, and it says, just as the term field stated there with regard to shchicha, referring to two sayas of produce, so too the term field stated here with regard to peah refers to land that yields two sayas of produce. Now let's take a look at the Mara Fulda to help to understand this deeper. So he's saying that if you look at the Mishnah over the Mishnah below in 6.5 in Peah, it's going to teach that if one forgets a bundle containing two sayas of produce, it is not rendered shchicha. Rabbi Yeshua understands that the basis for this law is that the Torah, in the verse cited here, referred to forgetting a sheaf in the field, and this implies that if one forgets a field of produce in a field, it does not become shchicha. So that the two sayas of produce are considered a field of produce, and thus, if that amount is left behind, it does not become shchicha. So basically what this is saying is they're saying, like, look, over there in Peah 6.5, chapter 6, Halacha 5, let's say you were harvesting and you forgot on two seah of ground, which, by the way, is the size of the Mishkan, and you forgot the whole bunch of it. All of it you forgot. All of it. You could say that this is a field, two seah is a field, and you could say that the amount of produce that is there is also corresponding to a field. And the halacha over there, and that Mishnah is going to be saying that if you forgot for in the produce of one field, it does not become shchicha. In other words, the produce of the size of the field, so that you have a field that has this size, and all the produce has this size, would cover this size if you were to be planting it, and that if you forgot the whole thing, that whole thing is not going to be rendered as shchicha. You can go back and it's still legally yours. It hasn't, the ownership hasn't transferred to the poor. That's what he's saying. And he's saying that because over here your field is connected to the size of land over here of two seah, and the word your field in Peah is over here, he's saying that just like over here in Peah and just like over here with shchicha, that it's going to be two seah. The land size is going to be two seah. So the just as a note, it's unclear the exact source of the teaching of the two seah of produce that are going to be considered a field regarding the forgotten sheaves. But the Gemara over there is going to give two derivations of the law that a two seah bundle cannot itself become the shchicha. In other words, that it's such a large amount that itself doesn't become a forgotten bundle. And that it's trying to define it and say, no, it's going to be something much, much smaller. That these are for forgotten bundles, not all of your crop for the season. That doesn't become shchicha. And so it's important to point that out, because you could get confused and say, oh well, you forgot your crop, too bad on you, and it's all, the property transferred and it's not yours anymore. And the oral law comes along and says, no, that's actually technically not true. It's still yours. It didn't transfer. It's not forgotten sheaves. But if you were to do a smaller amount, then it's pointing out that it would be. That's very important for the size of distinction. So, what would be the third opinion? So the Gemara asks, what's the basis of the opinion of Rabbi Tarfon? The Gemara answers, he says that he derives a 6 by 6 handbreadth measurement from the size of the garden patch. So just a bit about this. Let's look at the Mara Fulda. He says that the Mishnah in Kalayim 3:1 states that a garden patch, which is the area of 6 by 6 tefachim, may be sown with 5 types of seeds. And this phrasing indicates that the standard size of a garden patch is 6 by 6 tefachim. If, for example, one person sells a garden patch without identifying its dimension, he must give the buyer a patch this size. So this is basically saying, says the Marafulda, that Rabbi Tarfon concludes that an area of this size is significant enough to be obligated in Peah. And it continues. It says the law setting the standard size of a garden patch is derived from shiurim, chapter 5:13, where it states lechayav, like a garden patch of spices. And although the literal meaning of lechayav is cheeks, it is expounded as a form of the word lochot, and refers to the 2 tablets that God gave to Moses at Mount Sinai. And since the dimensions of those tablets were also 6 tefachim by 6 tefachim, and we know that in the Yerushalmi in chapter 6, Halacha 1, the verse is going to state that they were like a garden patch. And it follows that a garden patch is also 6 by 6 tefachim. So that's how he's coming up with this measurement. And how amazing is that it's going to be corresponding also to the size of the luchos. Very, very deep. And look at this. We're studying Peah, and look at how we're seeing how it has this generative thing, and it's connected to the size of the 10 Commandments, and it's connected to the temple courtyard and sizing, and how amazing is studying Torah. So let's look at the next opinion. The Mishnah says, Rabbi Yeshua ben Basira says, even if there's only enough to reap and repeat reaping, and the halacha is in accordance with his words. So the Gemara is going to inquire, and it's going to say, what type of reaping is Rabbi Yeshua ben Basira referring to? Is he referring to a harvest like the normal practice of reapers? That's the question. Or, says the Sugya, is he referring to any amount whatsoever? Wow, that's really, really interesting. And it's going to get something that you're going to think about also in a deep way. So the thing is, he's saying that, look, whoever reaps a fistful of grain in one reaping, this is the minimum Peah field that one grows a crop, and it has to be like at least 2 fistfuls. And so that you're cutting 1 fistful and you're leaving another fistful. Your fistful was to trigger the obligation and to harvest something, and there has to be something as a corner of a field, and he's saying that it's going to be at least 1 handful, and that's going to be for the poor. He's saying that this is going to be the minimum size. I just want to look at one of the comments here by the Meforshim, and with also Mara Fulda, and he's saying that perhaps Rabbi Yeshua ben Basira is referring to the smallest amount that could be reaped, which is 1 stalk, but less than 1 stalk cannot be reaped, although it can be plucked. You can pluck an ear off and leave a stalk standing. This is not called reaping, because reaping involves grasping the stalk with 1 hand and cutting it with a sickle with the other hand. And according to this possibility, even a field which contains only 2 stalks is subject to Peah. So what he's saying is, he's saying that, And the Gemara is inquiring and saying, what type of reaping is Rabbi Yeshua ben Basira referring to? Is he referring to harvesting like a normal practice of reapers, or referring to any amount whatsoever? So you could say, well, what if it's one stalk and one stalk? Isn't that going to be? How do you know he's talking about a normal handful from, if you're looking at people in India cutting wheat today with a sickle and grabbing it all by your hand and cutting it with a sickle? Isn't that what he's talking about? Or is he talking about something smaller? And of course, we could imagine that you just pluck the top of the wheat off and you leave the stalk standing. You could play all sorts of games like that. Okay, there's one stalk here, and that, is that what we're talking about for Peah? And the Gemara is going to give a really unexpected answer, and something that I was really surprised when I was thinking about it. What would the answer be? What could it be? Why? What? I mean, this is going to be really out of left field when you think about it. I mean, if you could stop this for a second and think, what would be this thing? In other words, this practice of normal reapers. Why wouldn't it be? Why wouldn't it be? Why shouldn't it be less than a handful? Just think for a second. What does it mean that you're harvesting less than a handful of wheat? Why would that be a concern? What would that mean in Judaism? What would that mean symbolically for being a human? So the Gemara is going to answer, and it's going to give such a rich, deep answer. And it says, derive from the answer from that which is written in Tehillim in 129, line 7, and it says like this. It says, the sugya says, with which the harvester cannot fill his palm, nor the binder of sheaves his apron. And the sugya finishes, and it says, this verse tells you in effect that Rabbi Yeshua ben Basira is referring to harvesting like the normal practice of reapers. So what is this verse in Tehillim 129 saying? What could it be? And in this, the person who wrote that psalm is cursing the wicked sinner. And he's declaring that they should be like a crop that withers before the harvest, to the extent that the harvester can't even fill his palm with it, nor the binder of the apron. In other words, he becomes so cursed, and the ground becomes so cursed, and the crop becomes so cursed, the person is trying to harvest, and he can't even grab a handful to harvest. And that this is what this curse to the sinner is. And it's basically declaring that not only should the crop become withered like that, and that his produce become withered like that, but he has all the suffering that goes along with it, that he's out there working and he can't get enough, and he's heavy with sin, and maybe he's unrepentant, and here he is, he has to bring food home for his family and for himself, and the land refused to grow enough even to gather with the hand, and it's a curse. And we know that in the list of curses, that the land will turn to iron and copper for the Jew who makes horrible sins and doesn't repent, and that you have this visual of it being so bad that you can't even gather enough to sustain yourself. And that, in fact, is one of the curses in the Torah, that you become so crazy that you're not even able to support yourself. And we know a famous story. There was a lady who was from the richest family in Jerusalem during the siege of Jerusalem, and she became so poor, and she was so haughty, and she had a lot of issues, and she was reduced to becoming so rich, to becoming so poor, that she had to go out to the field, to the city, to the town, and look for kernels of wheat from the dung of sheep and donkeys and animals, to try to find enough kernels to eat. that's how poor she became. So we see this as a curse and a reoccurring curse all through the Tanakh of the person who becomes so heavy and unrepentant of sin that they can't even gather enough to support themselves. So Rabbi Yeshua ben Basira is saying that no, it has to be like a normal reaping. It can't be like something from a curse. In other words, it's not enough to say you have one stalk and one stalk, because that stalk that you'd be grabbing and that final stalk, that's something that you're gathering as a curse, not something that you're gathering with blessing. And we know that the Jew who is following halachot and he's Yirat Shamayim and he's learning and he's having the correct hashkafa, and he's not crooked with modernity and crooked with the iPhones and crooked with all the movies and YouTube, and he's going the right direction, that he's going to be getting blessing. And the person who is sitting there getting all twisted and going the wrong way is going to be living where they're getting curses, and they're going to have all sorts of calamities, and the Torah is going to look at them like they're wicked. And we're not talking about a harvest for a person who's wicked where the land is not growing for them. We are talking about the Jew who's having a fistful that's there with simcha and is not a consequence of a curse. And so Rabbi Yeshua ben Basira is not referring to this possibility. He's referring to one fistful of reaping that is done in a normal harvest, in a normal way, without any of these curses, and leaving over one handful for the poor Jew.